In a modest suburban neighborhood where autumn leaves dance in the gentle breeze, Tom Miller spends his weekends building something extraordinary. A skilled carpenter struggling to make ends meet, he's transforming his backyard oak tree into a magical sanctuary. Not for his own daughter Emma, but for her best friend Sarah, a bright-eyed 7-year-old who has never seen the world around her. What Tom doesn't realize is that Sarah's mother, Claire Bennett, watches from afar. As the brilliant founder of a tech empire, she's spent millions searching for treatments for her daughter's blindness. But here, in this simple backyard, she witnesses something money can't buy: pure, unconditional kindness. Could this unexpected encounter between a struggling single father and a billionaire mother change both their lives forever? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Tom Miller's calloused hands trace the worn leather of his father's tool belt, fingers lingering over the embossed initials JM, worn smooth by decades of use. The morning sun filtered through his workshop's dusty windows, catching the metal buckle that had fastened around 3 generations of Miller men. Now it hung loose on his frame. He hadn't been eating much lately, too busy juggling single parenthood with keeping his small carpentry business afloat. "Daddy, we're going to be late," Emma's voice carried from the house, pulling him from his reverie. At 8 years old, she had already mastered their morning routine better than he had in the 3 years since Sarah, his wife, passed away. Tom quickly gathered his supplies for the day's job, a kitchen remodel for the Hendersons, who had been reviewing his quote for the past 2 weeks. He knew what that meant. They were shopping around looking for someone cheaper. These days, everyone was. "Coming, sweetheart," he called back, shoving his father's belt into his work bag. He couldn't bring himself to wear it anymore. Too many memories, too much weight of expectation. His own tool belt, cheaper but serviceable, waited by the door. Emma stood at the kitchen counter, her school uniform neat as always, methodically packing 2 lunch bags. "I made Sarah's sandwich without crust, just how she likes it," she announced proudly. "And I put in extra apple slices because she said they're easier to eat during recess." Tom's heart swelled with pride and ached simultaneously. His daughter shouldn't have to be this responsible at her age. "That's really thoughtful of you, Em. But you know you don't have to." "I want to," she interrupted, her chin lifting with that stubborn determination she'd inherited from her mother. "Sarah's my best friend, and she needs help sometimes. That's what friends do." The drive to school was quiet, save for the rattling of his old pickup truck, another repair bill looming on the horizon. Emma sat beside him, humming softly while reviewing her multiplication tables. 3rd grade was proving to be a challenge, but she attacked each new problem with the same quiet resolve she brought to everything else. They pulled up to Riverside Elementary just as Sarah's mother's driver was helping her out of a sleek black SUV. Tom watched through the rearview mirror as Emma jumped out and rushed to her friend's side, naturally taking Sarah's elbow in the practiced way they'd developed. "Hi, Mr. Miller," Sarah called out, her unseeing eyes turned unerringly toward his truck. Her spatial awareness was remarkable. She could identify most people by their footsteps or the sound of their vehicles now. "Morning, Sarah," Emma packed. "You something special for lunch today?" He waited until both girls were safely inside before pulling away, nodding politely to Sarah's mother's driver. He'd never actually met Claire Bennett. She was always too busy with her tech company to do school pickups or attend parent meetings. The gossip around town was that she was some sort of genius inventor, worth millions or maybe billions, not that it mattered much in their quiet suburb. The rest of his morning dissolved into the familiar rhythm of work, measuring twice, cutting once, smoothing rough edges into something beautiful. Carpentry had been his sanctuary since he was old enough to hold a hammer, working alongside his father in this very workshop. The tools might have changed. His father never had a laser level or an electric miter saw, but the principles remained the same. Transform something raw into something meaningful. Find the hidden potential in each piece of wood. It was during his lunch break, sitting on the Hendersons' back porch with a thermos of coffee, that the idea first took root. He'd been watching their children playing in their elaborate swing set, complete with rope bridges and climbing walls. The kind of thing he could never afford for Emma, no matter how many extra jobs he took on. But then he thought of Sarah, who had never experienced the simple joy of climbing, of feeling on top of the world. The old oak tree in his backyard had been begging for attention ever since they moved in, its sturdy branches reaching out like welcoming arms. He had the skills. He had most of the materials from various leftover jobs. And most importantly, he had a vision. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Tom sat at his workbench sketching preliminary designs. The treehouse would need to be different from any he'd built before. Everything would have to be carefully thought out: stable railings, textured pathways for navigation, smooth transitions between spaces. A place where a blind child could play freely, safely, independently. He worked until his eyes burned, until the pages were filled with possibilities. His father's tool belt sat nearby, and for the first time in years, Tom felt worthy of its legacy. This wouldn't be just another job. This would be something that mattered. As he finally headed to bed, the mounting bills on his kitchen counter caught his eye. The electricity warning, the mortgage statement, Emma's upcoming school fees. Building the treehouse would mean using materials he could be selling, spending time he should be using for paid work. It wasn't a sensible decision, but then he remembered Sarah's voice from that morning, so confident in identifying his truck, so full of joy at the simple pleasure of having a packed lunch from her friend. Some things, he decided, were worth more than money. Sarah's fingers danced across the raised dots of her favorite book, a well-worn copy of The Magic Tree that her grandmother had special ordered from England. The braille was starting to fade in places, but she knew the story by heart anyway. It was about a tree that grew different fruits in different seasons, each with its own magical property. She loved how the author described textures and sounds instead of just colors and sights. "What does magic taste like?" Emma asked, lying beside her on the classroom reading rug during indoor recess. Their teacher, Mrs. Martinez, always let them stay inside when Sarah preferred not to navigate the crowded playground. In the book, the summer peaches taste like warm hugs and birthday candles, Sarah explained, her face lighting up. "But I think real magic probably tastes like your dad's hot chocolate. You know, the one with the tiny marshmallows that pop and fizz on your tongue." Emma giggled. "Daddy says the fizzy marshmallows are just science, not magic." "Science, magic. Sometimes they're the same thing," Sarah replied, thinking of her mother's endless talk about technological breakthroughs and experimental treatments. "Mom's always saying that yesterday's magic is tomorrow's technology," or something like that. The mention of her mother brought a familiar ache. Claire had been away at another medical conference for the past week, leaving Sarah with Maria, their housekeeper. Maria was kind and patient, but she wasn't Mom. Sometimes Sarah wondered if her mother spent so much time searching for a cure because she couldn't bear to be around a daughter who couldn't see the world she was trying to show her. "Your mom invents really cool things, though," Emma offered, always trying to find the bright side. "Like that phone app that reads text messages out loud." Sarah smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah, she does. I just wish..." She trailed off, not wanting to seem ungrateful. Her mother had built an entire company around developing assistive technologies. Their house was filled with prototype devices meant to make Sarah's life easier. But what Sarah really wanted couldn't be engineered or coded. She wanted to climb trees like Emma did, to explore without constant supervision, to feel normal. The afternoon bell rang, its sharp tone softened by the classroom's acoustic tiles. Another special accommodation the school had made. As they packed up their books, Sarah's hand brushed against Emma's arm, feeling the small friendship bracelet she'd helped make last week. The wooden beads had different patterns carved into them, so Sarah could identify each one by touch. "Emma," Sarah asked hesitantly, "do you think your dad would let me touch the tree house while he's building it? I keep hearing all these interesting sounds from your backyard." "Of course," Emma exclaimed. "Daddy says you're family now." He even moved his special tools to make room for our reading corner in the workshop. Sarah clutched her Braille book closer to her chest, feeling its familiar weight and texture. She'd never had a friend like Emma before, someone who didn't treat her blindness like a tragedy or an inconvenience. Emma just adapted, like it was the most natural thing in the world to describe cloud shapes through touch comparisons or to warn about steps by squeezing her hand twice. As they walked to their pickup spots, Sarah listened to the afternoon sounds. She'd learned to navigate by the creaky handicap ramp, the water fountain's uneven drip, the rustle of the old maple tree by the entrance. Her cane swept in practiced arcs, but she barely needed it on this familiar route. "Sarah, honey, time to go home," Maria called from their usual waiting spot. "Your mother's on a video call and wants to show you something new." Sarah's heart lifted. Maybe Mom was finally coming home. "Bye, Emma. Thank you for lunch today. The apple slices were perfect squares." That evening, as Sarah sat in front of her mother's video call, listening to excited explanations about a new clinical trial in Switzerland, her thoughts kept drifting to the sound of hammering from Emma's backyard. Her mother's voice faded into the background, all technical terms and cautious optimism, while Sarah imagined what it would feel like to climb, to explore, to be brave. She ran her fingers over her book one more time before bed. But instead of reading about the magic tree, she dreamed about a different kind of magic, the kind that came from friendship, from understanding, from a father who built things with his hands and a daughter who saw with her heart. Tom sat at his workbench late into the night, the lamp casting a warm glow over his hand-drawn blueprint. Unlike his usual technical drawings, this one was different, covered in notes about texture variations, safety considerations, and ideas for incorporating sound elements. He'd spent the past week researching accessible playground designs, consuming every article and video he could find about how blind children navigate spaces. The blueprint had started as a simple sketch, but had evolved into something more complex. His careful pencil marks mapped out a series of connected platforms, each with its own distinct character. He'd added notations about using different wood grains for directional cues, installing guide ropes with varying textures, and creating percussion elements that would help Sarah understand where she was in the space. "Daddy," Emma's voice startled him. She stood in the workshop doorway in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed elephant. "I had an idea for Sarah's treehouse." Tom pushed back from the workbench, opening his arms. She climbed into his lap, studying the drawing with serious eyes. "What's your idea, sweetheart?" "Sarah really likes the wind chimes at school, the ones by the sensory garden. She says they help her know which way the wind is blowing. Could we make special ones for different parts of the treehouse?" Tom reached for his pencil, adding another note to the increasingly crowded blueprint. "That's brilliant, Em. What other things have you noticed about how Sarah finds her way around?" Emma's face scrunched in concentration. "She counts steps a lot, and she likes when things have different feels, like rough and smooth or warm and cool. Oh, and she's really good at remembering where sounds come from." Tom nodded, making more annotations. He'd noticed Sarah's acute awareness of sound during her visits, how she could tell exactly where Emma was just by the creak of a floorboard or the rustle of clothing. The next day, he invited Sarah and Emma into the workshop after school. The blueprint lay protected under a sheet of clear plastic, and he'd gathered samples of different materials: wood with various grains and finishes, rope of different thicknesses, metals with distinct temperatures and textures. "Sarah," he said, pulling up a stool for her, "I could use your expert opinion. Would you mind testing some materials for me?" Sarah's face lit up. Adults rarely ask for her expertise on anything. Her small hands moved carefully over each sample as Tom explained his ideas. She proved to be an invaluable consultant, explaining how certain textures were easier to distinguish than others, and how some surfaces that felt different to sighted people were too similar for her to use as markers. "This one," she said, running, her fingers over a piece of cedar with deep grooves. "Feels like reading a story. I can tell which way the lines are going. Like Braille, but bigger." Tom made more notes on the blueprint, watching as Emma guided Sarah's hand to each new sample. The girls worked together with the easy synchronization of long practice, Emma describing colors and patterns, while Sarah shared how each texture felt under her fingers. "Mr. Miller?" Sarah asked hesitantly after testing the last sample. Could we add something that makes music? Not just wind chimes, but maybe something we could play?" Tom thought of the old xylophone in his scrap pile, how its aluminum bars could be repurposed. What if we created a wall with different musical elements? We could use various materials so each section sounds unique, like a sound map, Sarah exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. "Then I could learn where everything is by the music it makes." Later that evening, after the girls had gone inside for dinner, Tom revised the blueprint again. The original design had been safe and functional, but now it was becoming something more, a space that would engage all the senses, that would allow Sarah to navigate independently through sound and touch. He traced his finger over the latest addition to the plans, a musical wall with recycled instruments at varying heights, each carefully positioned to help create a mental map of the space. The materials would cost more than he'd initially budgeted, and he'd need to put in extra hours to make up for the time spent on this project. But seeing Sarah's excitement made it worth every penny and minute. Tom carefully rolled up the blueprint, securing it with a rubber band. Tomorrow he'd start preparing the oak tree, checking for stable branches, marking attachment points, planning the initial platform height. But tonight, he allowed himself to imagine Sarah exploring the finished space, moving confidently through a world built just for her. The first wooden plank Tom mounted became more than just a foundation piece. It was a promise. He'd spent hours carving a subtle pattern into its surface, a series of flowing lines that would help Sarah understand the direction of the main platform. Early morning sunlight filtered through the oak leaves as he secured it in place, double-checking every bolt and bracket. "Is that the first piece?" Mrs. Rodriguez called from over the fence, coffee mug in hand. She'd been watching him work since dawn, curiosity finally getting the better of her. "Looks awful fancy for a kid's treehouse." Tom wiped sweat from his forehead, considering how to explain. "It's got to be special. It's for Sarah, Emma's friend. The patterns will help her find her way around." The blind girl. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice held a mixture of surprise and skepticism. "Isn't that dangerous?" "My Harold's on the town safety committee, and he says it'll be safer than most ground-level playgrounds," Tom interrupted, gentler than he felt. "Every detail's been planned with Sarah in mind." Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. By mid-morning, a small crowd had gathered to watch. Tom tried to ignore the whispered conversations, the head shaking, the well-meaning but uncomfortable suggestions that maybe he should focus on more suitable activities for a blind child. Mr. Chen from the hardware store stopped by during his lunch break, studying Tom's work with practiced eyes. "Interesting support system," he commented, running a hand along the reinforced joints. "Custom brackets?" "Had to be," Tom explained, grateful for a technical conversation. "Standard ones wouldn't allow for the tactile guides we need." He didn't mention that he'd spent 3 nights in his workshop fabricating the special brackets, or that the material cost had eaten into his emergency fund. The afternoon brought unexpected support. Ms. Thompson, a retired occupational therapist, from 2 streets over, arrived with a notebook full of suggestions about height considerations and grip strengths for children Sarah's age. Even better, she brought her grandson Billy, a teenage engineering enthusiast who offered to help with the heavy lifting. "My mum says you're crazy," Billy confided, as they hoisted the second platform beam into place. "But I think it's cool. Like, why shouldn't blind kids get to climb trees too?" Tom smiled, marking the beam for the next set of texture patterns. "Exactly what I thought." The work continued until dusk, each piece carefully placed and secured. Tom's back ached from the awkward angles, and his hands were raw despite his work gloves, but the basic structure was taking shape. The main platform now extended like a welcoming hand from the trunk, ready for the next phase of construction. Emma and Sarah sat in the grass below, Emma describing each addition, while Sarah listened intently to the sounds of construction. Tom caught fragments of their conversation as he worked. "The first floor is as high as your shoulders now, and Daddy's adding special rails that feel different on each side. What does it look like from your bedroom window?" "Like a big wooden hug in the tree. And wait till you feel the special board Daddy made. It's got swirls carved into it like waves." As the sun set, Tom reluctantly packed up his tools. The carved plank caught the last rays of light, its patterns throwing subtle shadows across the platform. He'd need to save up for more of the specialized materials, which meant postponing some repairs on his truck. Again, Sarah's voice drifted up. From below, "Mr. Miller, can I touch what you built today?" Tom climbed down quickly, helping Sarah navigate to the base of the tree. Her small hands found the carved plank, fingers tracing the patterns with delicate precision. Her face broke into a wide smile. "It feels like music," she whispered, following the flowing lines. "Like when my grandmother describes what songs look like." That moment made every skeptical glance, every dipped into savings dollar, every aching muscle worth it. Tom watched as Sarah explored the texture, already learning to use it for orientation, and saw what the neighbors couldn't. This wasn't about building something dangerous or impractical. It was about giving a child the freedom to explore, to play, to be just like any other kid. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Tom sat on the half-finished platform, looking at the carved plank in the moonlight. Each line, each pattern, was a step toward independence for Sarah. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more raised eyebrows from concerned neighbors. But for now, he ran his own fingers along the carved waves and remembered Sarah's smile. Some things were worth building, no matter what anyone else thought. Claire Bennett absently turned the business card between her fingers, its embossed surface catching the morning light, filtering through her home office windows. Tech Ability Solutions, CEO and founder. The card represented everything she'd built. Over the past decade, a billion-dollar company dedicated to creating assistive technologies. Yet lately, the embossed letters felt more like a weight than an achievement. She moved to the window, watching her driver help Sarah into the car for school. From her third-floor vantage point, Claire could see the Miller property 2 blocks, over where construction sounds had been drawing her attention all week. The treehouse project had initially sparked concern. Her legal team had already drafted a cautionary letter about liability, but something made her hold back from sending it. "Ms. Bennett?" Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The board is waiting for the quarterly presentation. Push it back an hour," Claire heard herself say, surprising both her assistant and herself. "I need to check on something first." 20 minutes later, Claire stood at the edge of her own property, hidden behind a row of carefully maintained hedges. From here, she had a clear view of Tom Miller's backyard. He was up in the tree, carefully installing what appeared to be a series of guide ropes, each with different colored markers attached. Her first instinct was to catalog the safety violations, the potential risks, the 1,000 ways this well-meaning but amateur project could go wrong. But then she saw something that made her pause. Tom was testing each rope himself, eyes closed, moving with deliberate care as he explored the space blindly. "The red beads mean you're near the sitting area," she heard him call down to someone. "Try feeling the different textures." Sarah's voice drifted back. "The bumpy ones are for turning right, and the smooth ones mean straight ahead." "Exactly. And what do you feel under your hands now?" Music notes, like in my piano books, but bigger. Claire pressed a hand to her mouth, watching her daughter navigate the lower platform with growing confidence. She'd spent millions on developing high-tech solutions, GPS guidance systems, computer interfaces, robotic aids. But here was Sarah, learning to explore through touch and texture and sound. A memory surfaced. Sarah, at age 3, before the diagnosis was confirmed, dancing to Claire's old piano recordings. Such a happy child, unafraid of the darkness that was slowly becoming her world. When had Claire started seeing that darkness as a problem to be solved, rather than a different way of experiencing life? She pulled out her phone, cancelling the board meeting entirely. For the next hour, she observed as Tom worked, noting how he integrated Sarah's feedback into each new addition. His methods were decidedly low-tech. Carved wood, textured ropes, wind chimes made from repurposed materials, but they spoke to something her expensive solutions often missed: the simple joy of play. A truck pulled into Tom's driveway, delivering more supplies. She watched him count out cash, noticed his hesitation before handing over what was clearly a significant sum. Her research team had already provided a comprehensive background. Thomas Miller, widowed father, small business owner, struggling to keep his carpentry business afloat in an increasingly digital economy. Yet here he was, investing time and money he clearly couldn't spare to build something for a child who wasn't even his own. Claire looked down at her business card again, at the company motto embossed beneath her name, "Building Bridges to Independence." Wasn't that exactly what Tom Miller was doing, one carefully carved piece of wood at a time? The sound of Sarah's laughter drew her attention back to the treehouse. Emma was guiding her friend's hands over a new feature, something that made musical tones when touched. Sarah's face was alight with joy, more animated than Claire had seen her in months of therapy sessions and medical consultations. Claire's phone buzzed, her assistant, probably wondering about the board meeting. She silenced it, watching as Tom demonstrated another safety feature to Sarah, his patience evident in every careful movement and clear explanation. He treated her daughter's blindness not as a limitation to be overcome, but as simply another way of experiencing the world. The business card in her hand suddenly felt like a symbol of everything she'd gotten wrong. Yes, she'd built a successful company, developed groundbreaking technologies, funded promising research. But watching Tom Miller teach her daughter to navigate by touch and sound, Claire realized she'd missed something fundamental about independence. It wasn't just about having the right tools. It was about having people who believed in your ability to use them. The storm came without warning, a violent summer squall that tore through the neighborhood just after midnight. Tom stood at his bedroom window, watching helplessly as rain drove sideways into the unfinished treehouse. Lightning illuminated the tarps he'd carefully secured, now whipping loose in the wind. Each flash revealed more damage, scattered materials, waterlogged wood, his week's work coming undone in minutes. By dawn, the full extent of the destruction was clear. Tom stood in the drizzling aftermath, holding a piece of water-damaged cedar that had been meant for the sensory wall. The specially treated wood had cost him nearly a week's grocery money, and now its surface was warped beyond salvation. Other materials lay scattered across the yard, some salvageable, many ruined. "Oh, Tom," Mrs. Rodriguez called softly from her side of the fence. She'd brought coffee in 2 thermal mugs, offering one without comment. "How bad is it?" He accepted the coffee gratefully, trying to keep the defeat from his voice. "The main structure's solid. I built that to withstand hurricanes. But all the specialized materials, the sensory elements," he gestured at the waterlogged pieces. "That's about $600 of lumber that's now better suited for firewood." "The whole neighborhood's been watching you work," she said, surprising him with her next words. "Harold, from the safety committee, he wouldn't stop talking about your ingenuity with those textured pathways. Said he'd never seen anything like it." Before Tom could respond, Mr. Chen's pickup truck rumbled into view. The hardware store owner emerged carrying several sheets of weather-resistant plywood. "Thought you might need these," he called out, unloading the materials. "Special order came in last week. Customer cancelled. Their loss, your gain. Half price." Tom started to protest, but Mr. Chen waved him off. "My sister's kid is blind, lives in Seattle. Nobody ever built anything special for her." He paused, then added gruffly, "Take the wood, Tom. Some things matter more than profit margins." Throughout the morning, neighbors stopped by. Ms. Thompson brought industrial-strength waterproof sealant left over from her son's deck project. Billy showed up with his father's wet-dry vacuum to help salvage what they could. Even Mrs. Rodriguez's husband Harold appeared, safety clipboard in hand, but instead of citations, he offered suggestions about weather-resistant materials. Emma and Sarah arrived from school to find the yard transformed into an impromptu workshop. Tom watched as Sarah's fingers found a piece of the damaged cedar, her face falling as she felt its warped surface. "It's okay, Mr. Miller," she said bravely, though her voice wavered. "Maybe we could use different wood. Something less expensive?" Tom knelt beside her, guiding her hand to a pristine piece of the cedar that had survived under better cover. "Feel the difference. This is why we need the special wood. Regular lumber wouldn't let you read the path so clearly. We'll figure something out." That evening, after everyone had gone home, Tom sat at his kitchen table surrounded by bills. The mortgage payment was already 2 weeks late. The truck's check engine light had been on for a month. Emma needed new shoes for school. And now, with the storm damage, he pulled out his father's old ledger, where he'd been tracking the treehouse expenses. The numbers didn't lie. Replacing the damaged materials would put him underwater for months. He could feel his father's tool belt watching him from its hook by the door, judging his financial recklessness. "Daddy?" Emma stood in the doorway in her pajamas. "I counted my savings." She placed a small jar on the table, coins and crumpled dollars visible through the glass. "It's $43.18 for Sarah's treehouse." Tom pulled his daughter close, his throat tight. "That's your birthday money, sweetheart." "Sarah's more important than a new bike," she said with the simple certainty of childhood. "And look what I found." She produced a slightly damp flyer from her pocket. "The hardware store is having a sale on cedar next week. I asked Mr. Chen specially." Tom studied the flyer, noting the dates. If he postponed the truck repairs again, took on that bathroom remodel he'd been avoiding because the client was notoriously difficult, and used Emma's sale tip, maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what the storm had taken. He looked at the weather-damaged materials scattered across his yard, each piece representing hours of careful preparation now lost. But something else had been revealed by the storm. A community willing to help, a daughter wise beyond her years, and the unshakable certainty that this project, however financially unwise, was exactly what he was meant to be doing. The wind chimes Tom crafted for the treehouse entrance weren't store-bought trinkets, but carefully tuned instruments. He'd spent evenings experimenting with different materials and lengths, creating distinct notes that would help Sarah understand. Her location. Copper pipes cut to precise measurements sang out in perfect thirds, while aluminum tubes provided softer, higher tones. Together, they created a musical map of the space. "Close your eyes," Sarah instructed Emma, standing at the base of the treehouse. "Now you can understand how I'll find my way around." She took her friend's hand, guiding her toward the entrance. "Hear how the copper chimes mean we're at the starting point? And when we move right..." Emma listened as the notes changed. "The aluminum ones, they sound like little bells." "Exactly. Mr. Miller made them, so I can always know which part of the treehouse I'm near. The copper means entrance, aluminum means right side, and the bamboo ones mean we're near the reading nook." Tom watched from his workbench, pretending to be occupied with other tasks, while secretly observing Sarah's growing confidence. After the storm setback, he'd rebuilt everything stronger, more resilient. The new cedar panels had been treated with extra sealant, their carved patterns deeper and more distinct. Each addition was tested not just for safety, but for how well it communicated through touch and sound. "Sarah," he called out, "would you like to help me install the new musical wall? I could use your expert opinion on the placement." Sarah's face lit up. She'd been involved in testing every feature, but this was different. This was helping to build. Tom guided her hands to the various recycled instruments he'd prepared. The xylophone bars mounted at different heights, the wooden percussion blocks, with varying tones, even a set of PVC pipes cut to different lengths that played notes when tapped. "If we arrange them in a circle," Sarah suggested, "I could use them like a clock face to know which direction I'm facing." "Brilliant," Tom agreed, making adjustments to his layout. "What if we put the highest notes at noon, then work our way down around the circle?" For the next hour, they fine-tuned the placement of each instrument, Sarah testing the sounds, while Emma kept notes on what worked best. The resulting installation was both functional and joyful, a musical compass that anyone could play. "Dad," Emma asked as they worked, "could we add something from Mom's wind chime collection? The one with the sea glass that used to hang on the porch?" Tom paused, remembering the careful collection his late wife had curated. They'd been packed away after her passing, the memories too painful. But now, "I think she'd like that, sweetheart. She always said beautiful sounds should be shared." They retrieved the boxes from the attic, and Sarah helped select chimes by their sound, while Emma matched the colored glass decorations. Together, they integrated these personal treasures into the treehouse, adding layers of meaning to its symphony. As afternoon faded into evening, Sarah made her first solo journey through the completed upper level. Tom and Emma stood back, watching as she navigated confidently from station to station. Her fingers found the carved guide rails, reading their patterns like a story. The wind stirred the chimes, creating a gentle soundtrack for her exploration. "The cule textures tell me where the boundaries are," Sarah explained, demonstrating for them, "but the sounds tell me where the fun is. Like here," she tapped a sequence of xylophone bars, playing a simple melody. "This means I'm at the storytelling corner. And over here," she moved to a different section, following the musical cues. "This is where the rope bridge begins." Tom had installed the bridge with multiple safety features, guide ropes at different heights, each with distinct textures, planks that made different tones when stepped on, and a gentle incline that helped indicate direction. Sarah crossed it slowly but surely, her movements becoming more confident with each step. "It's like walking through a song," she called back to them. "Everything has its own voice, and together they make a map I can follow." Emma joined her friend on the bridge, and soon their laughter mingled with the various chimes and tones. Tom watched them play, realizing that what he'd built was more than just an accessible treehouse. It was an instrument that played the music of childhood joy, a space where differences disappeared into harmony. The setting sun caught the sea, glass from his wife's wind chimes, sending small rainbows dancing across the wooden surfaces. Some of them fell across Sarah's face as she played, and though she couldn't see them, she seemed to sense their warmth. She was smiling, truly at home, in this symphony of sound and touch that had been created just for her. Claire sat in her home office, staring at the background check report on her tablet. The document was comprehensive, as thorough as one would expect when commissioned by the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company. But it wasn't the detailed financial records or work history that held her attention. It was the small newspaper clipping from 5 years ago, scanned and attached to the file. "Local carpenter donates custom furniture to Children's Hospital," the headline read. The article described how Tom Miller had spent 6 months of evenings crafting specialized furniture for the pediatric ward after his wife's passing there. No publicity sought, no tax write-offs claimed. Just quiet craftsmanship offered in memory of someone loved. Claire minimized the article, scrolling through the rest of the report. Tom's financial situation was exactly what she'd expected. Mounting. Mortgage payments, delayed maintenance on his work vehicle, a small business account that barely stayed in the black. Yet his credit report showed no frivolous spending, no desperate attempts to maintain appearances, just steady, careful management of dwindling resources until the recent spike in lumber purchases. Ms. Bennett, her assistant's voice came through the intercom. The acquisition team is ready for the startup review. Cancel it, Claire said, still scrolling through the report. And get me everything you can find about accessible playground design, patents, research papers, international standards, all of it. She spent the next hour studying Tom's work history. Every reference mentioned the same qualities: meticulous attention to detail, innovative problem-solving, absolute integrity. One contractor's quote stood out: "Miller won't cut corners, even when it costs him the bid. Says some things matter, more than money." A notification popped up on her screen. Sarah's latest medical evaluation had arrived from Switzerland. Claire opened it automatically, then stopped, struck by the contrast between the clinical language about her daughter's condition and the simple joy she'd witnessed in Tom's backyard. She pulled up the surveillance photos her security team had taken of the treehouse project. In one, Tom was testing a safety rail with his eyes closed, feeling his way along the path he'd created. Another showed him working late into the night, carefully carving texture patterns into cedar panels by lamplight. A third captured him and Emma giving Sarah a tour of the construction, guiding her hands over each new feature with infinite patience. The report contained his resume as well. Straightforward carpentry experience, no formal education beyond trade school, nothing that would suggest his intuitive understanding of universal design principles. Yet she'd watched him create solutions that rivaled the work of her most educated engineers. Claire opened her project folder, the one containing years of research into assistive technologies. Millions spent on development, countless prototypes tested and discarded. And here was a widowed carpenter, working with limited resources and unlimited heart, building something that made her daughter laugh with pure delight. She clicked through. More photos. Sarah navigating the treehouse pathways with growing confidence, Emma describing new features with enthusiastic gestures, Tom watching them both with quiet satisfaction. No fancy technology, no breakthrough algorithms, just thoughtful design and profound understanding of human needs. The next document in the background check made her pause. An insurance claim from 3 years ago. Tom had fallen from a scaffold, requiring surgery he could barely afford. He'd been back at work within weeks, against medical advice because clients were waiting and Emma needed school supplies. Claire closed the report and walked to her window. From here, she could just make out the treehouse through the evening haze, its wind chimes catching the last light. The sound carried faintly across the yards. Not random tinkling, she now realized, but carefully orchestrated notes designed to create acoustic landmarks. She thought about the acquisition meeting she'd just cancelled. Her company had been planning to buy out a promising startup developing navigation apps for the visually impaired. The technology was impressive, the market potential significant. But watching Tom Miller work, she'd begun to question her entire approach to accessibility design. Her phone buzzed. Another update from her research team in Geneva. Another potential treatment, another clinical trial, another fortune to be spent chasing a cure. Claire let it go to voicemail, remembering Sarah's face as she explored the treehouse that afternoon. Her daughter hadn't needed cutting-edge technology to find her way through that space. She'd needed exactly what Tom had given her. Someone who saw possibilities instead of limitations. Claire opened her laptop and began to type. Not another acquisition proposal or research grant, but something entirely different. A new position, one that didn't exist in her corporate structure. Director of Human-Centered Design. She had the perfect candidate in mind, assuming she could convince a certain carpenter to trade his tool belt for a broader canvas. The building code violation notice had all the warmth of a winter morning. Stark white paper, black official letterhead, red stamp marking it urgent. Tom stood in his driveway, reading it for the third time, trying to make sense of the bureaucratic language that threatened to demolish weeks of work and shatter a little girl's dreams. Unpermitted structure, potential safety hazard, immediate cessation of construction, formal review required. The words blurred together, but their meaning was clear enough. Someone had complained to the township about the treehouse, triggering an automatic inspection order. "Morning, Tom," Harold Rodriguez called, crossing the street with unusual purpose. "I tried to warn them at the committee meeting that you knew what you were doing, but Johnson, you know, that new inspector, he's by the book, says there's no precedent for this type of accessible structure in a residential zone." Tom folded the notice carefully, tucking it into his shirt pocket. "How long do I have?" "They're coming this afternoon for the initial inspection. Listen, I know it looks bad, but—" The sound of Sarah and Emma returning from their morning walk interrupted them. The girls had started the routine weeks ago, Sarah practicing her independence with the treehouse techniques Tom had taught her, Emma describing the neighborhood's changing colors as they walked. "Mr. Miller," Sarah called out, her face bright with excitement, "I counted all the steps from my house to here by myself today. The different sidewalk textures helped, just like in the treehouse." Tom's heart clenched. How could he tell her that her special place might be torn down? That bureaucracy didn't have a checkbox for imagination or a permit form for dreams? Tom. Harold's voice was quieter now, watching the girls head toward the backyard. "Give me an hour. I need to make some calls." The morning crept by with excruciating slowness. Tom worked in his shop, unable to focus on client orders, jumping every time a car slowed near his house. By 11, he noticed unusual activity in the neighborhood. Ms. Thompson was organizing something on her front porch. Mr. Chen's truck kept making passes through the street, dropping off people Tom recognized from the hardware store's contractor. Clientele. At noon, Emma came running in from the backyard. "Daddy, you need to see this." Tom followed her out, stopping short at the sight that greeted him. His normally quiet yard had transformed into what looked like a town hall meeting. Harold stood near the treehouse with a group of people Tom recognized from the building department. Ms. Thompson had set up a display of occupational therapy equipment, demonstrating something about grip strength to an interested official. But, most surprisingly, there was Claire Bennett, Sarah's mother, whom he'd never properly met, standing with what appeared to be a team of professionals. She was gesturing to various features of the treehouse, while a man in an expensive suit took careful notes. "Mr. Miller," she said, turning as he approached. "Perfect timing. Allow me to introduce Robert Chen, no relation to your hardware store. Friend from the National Institute of Accessible Design. He's very interested in your innovative approach to spatial navigation." Tom blinked, overwhelmed. "I don't understand." "Your treehouse project has inadvertently become a case study in universal design," she explained, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "When Harold called about the inspection, I took the liberty of inviting some experts who might help explain its significance to the local authorities." The building inspector, Johnson, stood nearby with his clipboard, looking increasingly uncomfortable as Robert Chen pointed out safety features that exceeded standard requirements. Harold was showing another official the detailed drawings Tom had made, while Miss Thompson demonstrated how the various textures and sounds created a comprehensive navigation system. "The thing is, Tom," Claire continued, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by the key players, "my company has been developing similar concepts for accessible public spaces. We'd love to contract you as a consultant, assuming the project is allowed to continue as a prototype installation." Tom caught the subtle emphasis on prototype and installation, words that transformed his treehouse from a potential code violation into an innovative research project. He watched as Johnson slowly lowered his clipboard, his expression shifting from bureaucratic rigidity to cautious interest. "Of course," Claire added smoothly, We'll need to document everything properly. Permits, insurance, safety certifications. My legal team can handle all of that, assuming you're interested in a formal collaboration." Before Tom could respond, Sarah's voice rang out from the treehouse entrance. "Listen, everyone. I can show you how it works." She demonstrated the wind chime navigation system, explaining each sound's significance with proud expertise. The officials gathered around, watching in fascination as this blind child moved confidently through a space designed specifically for her needs. The violation notice crinkled in Tom's pocket, no longer a death sentence for the project, but an unexpected bridge to something larger than he'd imagined. The legal documents Claire spread across Tom's workshop table looked impossibly complex. Permits, liability waivers, design patents, and research grants. But it was the simple sheet on top that caught his attention. A preliminary contract naming him as lead design consultant for Techability Solutions' new Accessible Spaces initiative. "I know it's overwhelming," Claire said, watching his expression carefully, "but these papers protect both you and the project. They legitimize what you've already created and open doors for what could come next." Tom ran his fingers over the embossed company logo, remembering similar papers he'd seen after his wife's passing. Medical bills and insurance claims that had nearly buried him. "I'm just a carpenter, Ms. Bennett. I build things people can use. I'm not sure I'm qualified for—" "Please call me Claire," she interrupted, pulling out her phone and playing a video she'd recorded earlier that day. On the screen, Sarah was giving a tour of the treehouse to the accessibility experts, explaining the navigation system with the kind of confidence Tom had never heard in her voice before. "That's not just carpentry," Claire said softly. "That's insight, understanding. The kind of intuitive design that all our technology and research budgets haven't managed to achieve." Through the workshop window, they could see Emma and Sarah in the treehouse, their laughter mixing with the wind chimes' melody. The contrast between the sterile legal documents and the living, breathing reality of what they represented wasn't lost on either adult. "Your daughter," Tom began carefully. "She's why you built your company." Claire's professional demeanor slipped slightly. "I thought if I threw enough money and technology at the problem, I could fix everything. Make her world normal." She laughed quietly. "And then you build this magical place with nothing but wood and wisdom, and suddenly she's navigating spaces better than she ever has with all our expensive gadgets." "It's not magic," Tom protested. "It's just listening. Sarah taught me as much as I taught her. The way she experiences space, how she creates mental maps through sound and texture. I just followed her lead." "Exactly." Claire's eyes lit up. "That's what we've been missing. We've been designing for people instead of with them. Your treehouse isn't just accessible, it's intuitive, natural. It works because you understood the human element." She pulled another document from her briefcase, this one marked with multiple sticky notes. "These are the standard building codes that almost shut us down today. They're well-intentioned but limited. What if we could rewrite them? Create new standards that incorporate what you've learned about organic, sensory-based design." Tom picked up his father's old tape measure, running it through his fingers as he considered her words. "You're talking about changing the whole approach to accessible spaces. Starting with playgrounds," Claire nodded. "Then parks, schools, public buildings. Imagine spaces that work for everyone, not because they meet some minimum requirement, but because they're designed to enhance human experience." The tape measure in Tom's hands had belonged to his father and his grandfather before that. 3 generations of builders who believed in doing things right, in creating spaces that served people's needs. What Claire was proposing felt like an extension of that legacy, building not just with wood and nails, but with understanding and purpose. "There would be conditions," he said finally. "I need to keep my workshop, my regular clients. Emma's life has had enough disruption." "Of course," Claire agreed quickly. "We can set up a satellite research facility right here. Your workshop becomes our design laboratory. And Emma? She glanced out at the girls again. Well, it seems our daughters have already figured out the important parts. A burst of musical notes drifted in from the treehouse. Sarah had discovered a new combination of wind chimes. Tom watched as Emma guided her friends' hands to different instruments, both girls conducting their own symphony of navigation. One more thing, he said, turning back to Claire. Everything we design has to be tested by the people who'll actually use it. No theory without practice. Claire's smile was genuine, reaching her eyes in a way her professional expressions never did. I think we just found our new product testing coordinator. She gestured towards Sarah, who was now teaching Emma to navigate the treehouse with her eyes closed. Assuming she's willing to take on the responsibility, Tom looked down at the contract again, seeing it with new eyes. Not just legal protection or professional validation, but a bridge between his world of practical craftsmanship and Claire's world of technological innovation. A way to transform his small act of kindness into something that could help countless others. He picked up the pen Claire offered, its weight somehow lighter than his worn pencil, but carrying so much more potential. Where do I sign? The medical records lay open on Claire's kitchen table, their clinical language softened by the late afternoon sunlight. Sarah's latest test results from Switzerland had arrived that morning, and for the first time in 7 years, they contained a word Claire had almost stopped hoping for: promising. It's an experimental procedure, she explained to Tom, who sat across from her, still in his work clothes from the treehouse construction. A new type of gene therapy combined with neural regeneration. The success rate in preliminary trials is higher than anything we've seen before. Tom studied the complex medical terminology, understanding little but recognizing the tremor of hope in Claire's voice. And the risks? Present but calculated. The Swiss team has been refining the procedure for years. She pushed another document forward, a surgical schedule with dates circled in red. They can take her next month, but... She glanced toward the window, where the sound of wind chimes drifted in from Tom's yard. Sarah and Emma were in the tree house as usual. Their voices carried across the yards, Sarah explaining to Emma how to identify different birds by their calls, a skill she'd developed to compensate for her lack of sight. The irony wasn't lost on either parent. She's thriving right now, Claire continued, her professional facade cracking slightly. For the first time, she's not defined by what she can't do. That tree house, your design approach, it's given her confidence I've never seen before. And now I'm considering disrupting all of that for a procedure that might not even work. Tom reached for his coffee mug, buying time to choose his words carefully. When Emma's mother was sick, the doctors presented us with options, some safe, some risky. She chose the aggressive treatment because she wanted to give Emma every possible chance at having a mother. He paused, the memory still raw. It didn't work out the way we hoped, but I never doubted her right to try. Claire touched the medical files gently, as if they might hold answers beyond their printed pages. Sarah doesn't know yet. I haven't figured out how to tell her that everything might change, or might not change at all. How do I explain that to a 7-year-old who's just found her place in the world? A burst of laughter from outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see Emma guiding Sarah along one of the new features they'd added to the treehouse, a rope bridge with different textured knots marking the path. Sarah moved with complete confidence, teaching Emma the system she'd helped design. Look at them, Tom said softly. Sarah's not just coping with her blindness anymore, she's mastering it. Whatever you decide about the surgery, that achievement is real. No medical procedure can take away what she's learned about herself these past few weeks. Claire nodded, blinking back unexpected tears. The doctors want an answer by Friday. The surgical team needs time to prepare, and there's only one opening in their schedule for the next 6 months. She straightened the papers with trembling hands. I've spent 7 years and millions of dollars searching for a cure. Now that it's potentially within reach, I'm terrified of what reaching for it might cost her. Maybe, Tom suggested, you should ask Sarah what she wants. Not about the surgery specifically, but about how she sees her future. She might surprise you with her insight. As if on cue, Sarah's voice floated through the window. Emma, close your eyes again. Now feel how the rope texture changes. That tells you you're halfway across. It's like reading a story with your hands. Claire watched her daughter teaching her friend, seeing not a child limited by disability, but a young girl coming into her own power. She deserves every possible chance, she whispered, echoing Tom's words about his late wife. But she also deserves to know that she's perfect exactly as she is. Tom stood, moving to the window. The treehouse stood proud against the evening sky, its carefully crafted features catching the last rays of sunlight. Whatever you decide, he said, that space will be there for her. A place where she can be entirely herself, whether that self can see or not. Claire joined him at the window, their shoulders almost touching. The medical records behind them held possible futures, but the scene before them showed a beautiful present. Two girls playing in a space that celebrated difference rather than trying to overcome it. The choice ahead was momentous, but watching Sarah navigate her world with such joy made Claire realize that perhaps the real miracle had already happened. Not in a Swiss laboratory, but in a simple backyard where a carpenter had taught her daughter to see with her heart. The job offer letter sat between them on Tom's workshop table, its crisp corporate letterhead a stark contrast to the sawdust and wood shavings that surrounded it. The salary figure made Tom's head spin, more money than he'd make in 5 years of carpentry work. But it was the job title that gave him pause. Director of Innovative Design, Accessibility Division, Tech Ability Solutions. You'd have complete creative control, Claire explained, gesturing to the project outline attached to the offer. Your own team, your own budget, and the resources to implement your ideas on a global scale. The treehouse would be just the beginning. Tom ran his thumb along the edge of his father's worn chisel, its handle smooth from generations of use. It's not about the money, Claire. This workshop, these tools, they're more than just a business. They're my family's legacy. I understand that, Claire said softly. That's why the offer includes keeping the workshop as your design studio. We'd modernize it, add the equipment you need, but maintain its character. Your local clients could become beta testers for new accessibility features. Through the window, they could hear Sarah giving another tour of the treehouse to a group of neighborhood kids. Her voice carried clearly as she explained how different textures and sounds helped her navigate. When the wind chimes play this, note I know I'm at the story corner, and feel this railing. The spiral pattern means there's a turn coming up. She's become quite the teacher, Claire observed, watching her daughter's confident movements. The other parents have been calling, you know. They want to know if you could add similar features to their yards, their homes. You've started something here, Tom. He nodded, thinking of the growing list of requests on his desk. Families with elderly parents who needed better navigation systems, parents of autistic children who responded well to sensory guidance. Even the local park committee had inquired about incorporating his design principles into their upcoming renovation. And then there's Switzerland, Claire added quietly. They both knew what she meant. The experimental treatment for Sarah would require months of rehabilitation, regardless of its outcome. We'll need someone who understands both the medical and practical aspects of recovery spaces. Tom picked up the offer letter again, its weight somehow greater than the simple paper it was printed on. Emma's whole life is here. Her school, her friends, her memories of her mother. The position wouldn't require relocation, Claire assured him quickly, perhaps too quickly, revealing her own investment in keeping him nearby. We'd establish the Research and Development Center here, build something that brings opportunities to the community, not takes them away. The workshop door creaked open, and Emma poked her head in. Daddy, Sarah wants to show you something new she figured out with the musical wall. She says it's important for the project. Tom and Claire exchanged a look, both recognizing how seamlessly their daughters had adapted to the changing dynamics between their families. Emma had become Sarah's unofficial design partner, translating her friend's sensory experiences into ideas Tom could implement. And Sarah had given Emma a sense of purpose. She'd been missing since her mother's death. "Be right there, sweetheart," Tom called. After Emma disappeared, he turned back to Claire. "If I take this position, everything changes. Not just the work, but us," Claire finished softly. The unspoken attraction between them had been growing alongside their professional collaboration. "That's not why I'm offering you the job, Tom. The company genuinely needs your insight. The fact that we... She paused, composing herself. "The personal aspect is separate." Tom stood, moving to his workbench, where his latest project lay unfinished, a scale model of an accessible playground based on the treehouse principles. His sketches covered the wall behind it, showing how traditional playground equipment could be modified with textural and acoustic elements. "I've been thinking bigger lately," he admitted, gesturing to the designs, "about how these ideas could help more kids, more families, but I never imagined—" "That's exactly why you're perfect for this," Claire said, joining him at the workbench. "You see possibilities where others see limitations, just like you did with Sarah." The sound of children's laughter drifted in from outside, punctuated by the harmonic tones of the treehouse's musical features. Tom looked down at the job offer again, seeing not just a career opportunity, but a chance to transform his small act of kindness into something that could touch countless lives. "If I say yes," he said finally, "we do this right. No cutting corners, no compromising quality for profit. Every design has to matter to someone, the way that Treehouse matters to Sarah." Claire's smile held both professional satisfaction and personal warmth. "I wouldn't expect anything less." She held out a pen, not a corporate ballpoint, but a carpenter's. Pencil from his own desk. "Shall we build something remarkable together?" The dinner receipt from Giovanni's Italian restaurant had been tucked into Tom's wallet. A simple piece of paper that marked the first time their families had shared a meal together. Claire had insisted on treating them to celebrate his acceptance of the position, choosing the cozy family restaurant over the upscale venues she typically frequented for business meetings. "The garlic bread smells amazing," Sarah announced as they settled into their booth, her face lighting up at the familiar aroma. She'd been to Giovanni's before with Emma and Tom, and the owner had always made sure to warn her when plates were hot, describing the location of items on her plate using clock positions. "It's Mrs. Giovanni's secret recipe," Emma explained too. Claire, automatically arranging Sarah's silverware in the pattern they'd developed. "She puts herbs from her garden in it. Sarah can name them all by smell." Tom watched as Claire took in these small details, the easy way the girls worked together, the thoughtful accommodations that had become second nature. Her usual polished, corporate demeanor softened, replaced by something more uncertain, but more genuine. "I used to love cooking," Claire admitted, studying the menu, "before everything got so complicated. Sarah and I would spend Sundays trying new recipes. We could do that again," Sarah suggested hopefully. "Emma says Mr. Miller has a great kitchen, and he's teaching her all about measuring ingredients by touch, just like you used to do with me, Mom." A moment of silence fell over the table, heavy with possibilities and unspoken emotions. Tom found himself holding his breath, watching Claire's response. Since accepting the job offer 3 days ago, they'd maintained a careful professional distance, both aware of how their personal feelings could complicate their working relationship. That would be nice," Claire managed, her voice thick with emotion. "Maybe this weekend?" The arrival of Mrs. Giovanni herself broke the tension. The elderly restaurant owner had been informed of Sarah's potential surgery by Emma, and she'd prepared something special. "For my favorite food critic," she announced, placing a basket of bread on the table. "I made each piece with different herbs and shaped them differently. Let's see if you can identify them all, Sarah." What followed was part game, part lesson. As Sarah's sensitive fingers and nose identified rosemary, basil, oregano, and thyme, matching each herb to the shape of the bread it seasoned, Claire watched in amazement as her daughter demonstrated an expertise she hadn't known she possessed. "Mom, feel this one," Sarah insisted, placing a twisted breadstick in Claire's hand. "The shape tells you it has rosemary, just like the spiral patterns in the treehouse tell you when to turn right." Tom recognized the moment Claire understood, really understood, what they'd been creating in his backyard. Not just an accessible space, but a whole new language of navigation that Sarah had internalized and was now teaching others. "You've learned so much," Claire whispered, her fingers tracing the breadstick's pattern. "All this time, I've been focusing on what medicine could fix, when I should have been seeing how brilliantly you've adapted." The main courses arrived, each plate carefully arranged according to Sarah's preferred layout. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally between business plans and personal stories. Emma shared her ideas for new treehouse features, while Claire described the international interest in their accessibility project. Tom found himself relaxing, enjoying the warm family atmosphere that had been missing from his and Emma's lives for so long. "Tell them about Switzerland, Mom," Sarah said suddenly, putting down her fork. "Emma's worried I'll be gone too long and miss the start of school." Another weighted silence fell. They hadn't discussed the surgery during their professional meetings, keeping that decision separate from the business venture. But here, in the comfortable warmth of Giovanni's, the lines between personal and professional blurred. "Actually," Claire began carefully, "I've been thinking about that. The procedure, it doesn't have to happen right away. The doctors said we have some time to prepare, to make sure everything is right. And there's so much happening here now." Tom watched as Sarah reached across the table, finding her mother's hand with perfect accuracy. "It's okay, Mom. I'm not scared anymore, whatever we decide. The treehouse taught me that being blind isn't the same as being lost." The profound simplicity of Sarah's statement hung in the air, bringing unexpected tears to Claire's eyes. Tom instinctively reached out, covering both their hands with his own. Emma completed the circle, adding her small hand to the pile. Mrs. Giovanni, passing by with dessert menus, paused at the sight of their joined hands and tear-stained smiles. Without a word, she slipped away and returned with a tiramisu. "On the house, for the family." "Family?" The word echoed in Tom's mind as he looked at their hands, still linked across the checkered tablecloth. The dinner receipt in his wallet would mark not just their first meal together, but the moment they all realized that something deeper than business partnerships or accessibility projects was taking root. The custom door handle Tom crafted for the treehouse's main entrance embodied everything they'd learned over the past months. Its surface told a story through texture, spiral grooves flowing into a smooth central panel, then radiating outward, in a pattern that naturally guided the hand to the correct grip position. But it was more than just functional. It was beautiful, catching the light in ways that delighted sighted visitors while providing perfect tactile navigation for Sarah. "It's the last piece," Tom explained to Claire as they stood in his workshop, the handle resting on a velvet cloth between them. "I wanted it to be special, not just accessible, but extraordinary," Claire finished, running her fingers along the carefully crafted grooves, like everything else you've built here. Her touch lingered on the handle's surface, much as it had started lingering on Tom's arm during their evening planning sessions. The workshop had transformed alongside their relationship. Claire's tech company had provided new equipment that blended seamlessly with Tom's traditional tools. Digital design screens, shared space with hand-carved prototypes. A corner desk held Sarah's growing collection of texture samples, each labeled in Braille that Emma was learning to read. "Sarah's going to love this," Claire said softly, "though I'm not sure anything could make her love that treehouse more than she already does." They both glanced out the window to where Sarah was conducting her daily accessibility tour for a group of visiting designers. Their prototype had become a pilgrimage site for architects and urban planners interested in their innovative approach. Sarah had naturally fallen into the role of lead demonstrator, her confidence growing with each presentation. "The textures aren't just for navigation," they heard her explaining to the group. "They're like reading a story with your whole body. This pattern tells you you're at the entrance, but it also makes you feel welcome, invited. Design isn't just about finding your way, it's about belonging." Tom smiled, remembering the shy girl who had first visited his yard, clinging to Emma's arm. Now Sarah moved through the space as if she'd been born there, teaching others to see the world through her perspective. "She's right, you know," he said to Claire. "This project stopped being about accessibility a long time ago. It became about changing how we think about spaces entirely." Claire nodded, her professional demeanor softening as it always did when they discussed their daughters. "The Swiss doctors called yesterday. They're still interested in the procedure, but—" She paused, watching Sarah demonstrate a musical navigation feature to her captivated audience. They agreed there's no rush. Sarah's thriving, developing skills and confidence that will serve her well, regardless of whether she ever regains her sight. Tom picked up the door handle, its weight familiar in his hands. He'd spent weeks getting every detail right, knowing it would be the first and last thing Sarah touched on her daily visits. Sometimes we focus so much on fixing things that we miss the beauty in how people adapt, how they find their own ways of moving through the world. Says the carpenter who's revolutionizing accessible design, Claire teased, but her eyes were serious. "Tom, the International Accessibility Conference called again. They want us to keynote together, you, me and Sarah, showing how family dynamics led to professional innovation." "Family dynamics," Tom repeated softly, the words carrying weight. Beyond their professional implications, the past months had seen their families gradually intertwining, sharing meals, homework sessions, and weekend adventures. Emma and Sarah were inseparable, and he and Claire had stopped pretending their late-night planning sessions were purely about work. The door handle caught the afternoon light, sending ribbons of sunshine dancing across the workshop walls. Tom had incorporated a subtle heart pattern into its center, visible only at certain angles, a private acknowledgement of the love that had grown alongside their project. "We should install it together," he suggested, gathering his tools. "All of us. It's the final piece, after all." Claire understood what he wasn't saying. The handle would complete more than just the treehouse. It would mark the moment their separate paths fully merged into a shared journey. They called the girls in from the yard, Sarah still glowing from her presentation, Emma carrying their latest design notebook. As they gathered around the workshop table, Tom placed the handle in Sarah's hands. "Feel that heart in the center?" he asked softly. "I put it there to remind us that the best designs come from love. Love for family, for creativity, for seeing the world in new ways." Sarah's fingers traced the pattern, a smile spreading across her face. "It feels like home," she said simply, and they all understood she meant more than just the treehouse. The handle would be the final touch on their original project, but it was also a beginning. Together, they carried it out into the autumn sunshine, ready to open new doors none of them had imagined when this journey began. The ceremonial ribbon stretched across the treehouse entrance was no ordinary strip of fabric. Tom and Emma had spent hours creating it, weaving different textured materials into a pattern that told the story of their journey. Smooth satin gave way to rough burlap, then to pieces of worn denim from Emma's old jeans, each transition marked with tiny bells that chimed softly in the morning breeze. "It's perfect," Sarah declared, running her fingers along the ribbon's length. "Everyone can experience the opening ceremony their own way." She was dressed in her favorite blue dress, the one she'd chosen specifically because Emma had described it as matching the sky above their treehouse. The backyard had transformed for the occasion, Local news crews set up their equipment, while representatives from disability rights organizations mingled with town officials. Mr. Chen had closed his hardware store early, bringing his entire staff to celebrate the project that had consumed so many of his materials and so much of his support. "Ready for your speech?" Claire asked Sarah, adjusting her daughter's collar with trembling hands. The moment felt weightier than any corporate launch she'd ever managed. "Mom," Sarah smiled, catching her mother's nervous hands, "I've been giving tours for months. This is just a bigger group." She turned her head toward the gathering crowd, identifying familiar footsteps and voices with practiced ease. "Besides, Emma helped me practice in the exact spot where I'll be standing." Tom watched them from near. The workshop, his father's tool belt secured around his waist for the first time in years. Today, it felt right to wear it, to honor the legacy of craftsmanship that had led to this moment. Emma stood beside him, proudly wearing the junior tool belt Claire had given her last week, complete with her own set of measuring tools. "Places, everyone," Mrs. Rodriguez called out, having appointed herself unofficial event coordinator. "The mayor's here, and the Accessibility Council representatives want to start their assessment tour right after the ribbon cutting." The crowd arranged itself naturally, forming a loose semicircle around the treehouse entrance. Sarah and Emma took their positions by the ribbon, while Tom and Claire stood behind them, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Distinguished guests," Claire began, her CEO voice carrying clearly across the yard. "What you're about to see isn't just an accessible treehouse. It's a prototype for a new way of thinking about design, one that celebrates different ways of experiencing the world." She nodded to Sarah, who stepped forward with perfect confidence. 2 months ago, I couldn't climb trees or explore spaces on my own. But Mr. Miller didn't see that as a problem to solve. He saw it as an opportunity to create something new. Every texture, every sound in this treehouse has meaning. It's like reading a story with your whole body, Sarah demonstrated, running her hands along the entranceway's guided paths. "These patterns aren't just for blind people. They help everyone understand the space better. My friend Emma closes her eyes sometimes when we play here because it's more fun to experience it through touch and sound." Emma stepped up next to her friend. "And I've learned to see things differently too. Sarah taught me that there are so many ways to understand where you are and where you're going. We even created a new game called Texture Tag that everyone can play equally." The girls demonstrated, moving confidently through the space, using only touch and sound cues. The watching crowd murmured in appreciation as Sarah navigated a complex turn without hesitation, following the musical notes that marked the path. "Today," Tom added, his voice rough with emotion, "we're not just opening a treehouse, we're opening minds to new possibilities. Every feature you'll see here started with a simple question. How would Sarah experience this?" He glanced at Claire, drawing strength from her presence. That question changed everything, not just the design, but our understanding of what accessibility really means. Claire stepped forward, completing their family circle around the ribbon. Techability Solutions is proud to announce that this is just the beginning. Together with our new Director of Innovative Design, she smiled at Tom, we'll be implementing these principles in playgrounds, schools, and public spaces across the country. "But first," Sarah interrupted with a grin, "who wants to learn how to play texture tag?" The ribbon waited between them, its varied surfaces catching the morning light. Sarah and Emma each took one end, their free hands linked together. Tom and Claire moved behind their daughters, adding their hands to the ribbon's texture-rich surface. "Ready?" Sarah called out. The bells chimed softly as the ribbon moved. "Ready," they answered together, and as they cut the ribbon, the sound of wind chimes filled the air, not just from their treehouse, but from dozens of new ones throughout the neighborhood, each designed to help create a world where everyone could find their way home. The house key rested in Sarah's palm, its surface carved with the same thoughtful patterns as the treehouse features. Tom had created it himself, incorporating raised dots that spelled home in Braille along its shaft. But it wasn't just any house key. It was the key to the newly renovated craftsman home, halfway between his workshop and Claire's place, where both families would soon live together. "The grooves tell you which way is up," Tom explained, watching Sarah explore the key's surface, "and the different textures on each side help you find the right orientation without having to see it. Just like the treehouse," Sarah smiled, "easily locating the key's position by touch alone. But this means we'll be here every day, not just for visits." They stood in what would become their shared living room, surrounded by moving boxes and the pleasant chaos of two families becoming one. Emma was upstairs, arranging her and Sarah's shared bedroom according to the accessibility principles they'd developed together. The sound of Claire directing movers drifted down from the second floor, punctuated by occasional consulting calls she took between unpacking sessions. "Mr. Miller, I mean Tom," Sarah corrected herself, still adjusting to the informal name. "Did you really build all these texture guides into the whole house?" "Every room," he confirmed, leading her to the kitchen doorway where subtle patterns in the woodwork provided navigational cues. Emma helped design most of them. She's becoming quite the accessibility expert herself. The kitchen had been specially modified, with textured handles indicating cabinet contents and subtle floor patterns, creating clear paths between work areas. Claire had added her own touches, high-tech appliances with voice controls and sensor, systems that complemented Tom's craftsman features. "Mum seems happier," Sarah observed, trailing her fingers along the countertop's guide rails. "She doesn't talk about Switzerland as much anymore." Tom paused in his unpacking, choosing his words. "Carefully. Your mom realized that sometimes the best solutions aren't about changing people, but about changing spaces to work better for everyone." "Like how you changed your whole business?" Sarah asked innocently, but with the perceptiveness that still sometimes startled him. Indeed, his workshop had evolved into something extraordinary. The original carpentry space now adjoined a state-of-the-art design studio, where his handcrafted prototypes were scanned and refined for mass production. Local craftspeople worked alongside tech developers, creating accessibility solutions that married traditional skills with modern innovation. "Speaking of business," Claire's voice came from the doorway, "the Chicago School Board loved our playground proposal. They want to implement the design in all their elementary schools." She crossed the kitchen to join them, her corporate heels exchanged for comfortable flats that made less noise, a small adaptation she'd made after noticing how Sarah tracked people by their footsteps. The transformation in Claire over the past months had been remarkable. The driven CEO was still there, but tempered now by a deeper understanding of what really mattered. "Did you tell them about our junior consultants?" Tom asked, winking at Sarah. "Of course, your accessibility workshops for kids are a major selling point. Schools love the idea of students learning to think about inclusive design from an early age." Sarah beamed with pride. She and Emma had started teaching other children about accessibility through play, turning their texture tag game into a full program that helped kids understand different ways of experiencing the world. "Emma!" Sarah called out suddenly, head tilted toward the stairs. "Come feel the new key Dad made." The word Dad hung in the air for a moment, new and precious. It had slipped out naturally a few weeks ago during a family dinner, and though Sarah had been embarrassed, Tom had felt his heart swell with joy. Emma thundered down the stairs, her excitement palpable. "Is it like the one we designed, with the special grip patterns?" "Even better," Sarah said, holding out the key. "Feel the braille? Now we can both read it." The girls huddled together, fingers tracing the key's surface as they shared their unique way of seeing the world. Claire moved closer to Tom, slipping her hand into his. "When I first watched you building that tree house," she murmured, "I never imagined we'd end up here." Tom squeezed her hand, remembering those early days of sawdust and uncertainty. Sometimes the best designs come from just trying to solve one simple problem with love. Outside, the late afternoon sun caught the wind chimes they'd hung by the front door, the same ones that had first taught Sarah to navigate the treehouse. Their melody carried through the new house, mixing with the sounds of their daughter's laughter and the quiet rhythm of boxes being unpacked. The key in Sarah's hands gleamed, not just a tool for opening doors, but a symbol of the family they'd built together, as carefully crafted as every other piece of their shared life. The family photo captured them all in the treehouse at sunset, exactly 1 year after that first day when Tom had started building. The image showed them gathered around the musical wall, Sarah demonstrating a new navigation technique to a group of visiting students, Emma proudly displaying the Accessibility Design Award they'd won, Claire beaming with maternal pride, and Tom watching them all with quiet joy. But like everything in their world, the photograph was more than just a visual memory. Tom had worked with a local artist to create a tactile version with raised surfaces that let Sarah see the moment with her fingers. The treehouse's texture, patterns were reproduced in miniature, letting her feel exactly where everyone stood. Even the frame had been crafted with their signature navigation markers, transforming a traditionally visual memento into something the whole family could share. "Tell me again what everyone's doing," Sarah asked, running her fingers over the surface as they sat in their living room on a quiet Sunday evening. Though she'd heard the description many times, it had become a beloved family ritual. "You're reaching up to the wind chimes," Emma began, following her sister's fingers across the raised surfaces, "teaching those kids from the blind school how to read the musical patterns we created together. And you're holding our young innovators award," Sarah continued, finding Emma's figure in the scene, "the one we won for teaching other kids about accessible design." Claire, curled up beside them on the sofa, added softly, "I'm standing by the railing, watching my brilliant daughters change the world, one texture pattern at a time." "And Dad's doing his proud lean," the girls finished together, giggling at their name for Tom's characteristic pose whenever he watched his family in action. Tom smiled from his armchair, surrounded by sketches for their latest project, a series of accessible community centers that would incorporate everything they'd learned from the treehouse. The Swiss doctors still called occasionally with updates about new treatments, but those conversations had lost their urgency. Sarah's world had expanded in ways no medical procedure could match. Their original treehouse had spawned dozens of others across the country. Schools, parks, and community centers now featured texture-guided paths and musical navigation systems. But more importantly, it had built something that couldn't be photographed or replicated, a family bound together by love, understanding, and the simple act of seeing the world through each other's hearts. "You know what's funny?" Sarah mused, still touching the tactile photograph. "Everyone thinks this is a picture of a treehouse, but it's really a picture of how 4 people learned to build something bigger than themselves." Claire reached for Tom's hand, their wedding rings catching the evening light. "And to think it all started with a father who believed that every child deserves a place to play." "No," Emma corrected, wise beyond her years. "It started with love, the kind that builds things to last." Outside their window, the original tree house stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, its wind chimes singing softly in the evening breeze. Like the family it had brought together, it had grown into something far more beautiful and meaningful than anyone could have imagined. A testament to the remarkable things that can happen when we open our hearts to different ways of seeing, feeling, and loving in this wonderfully textured world.